December 18th, 1944. Just outside Bryan, Texas. A dust-stained U.S. Army truck rattled down the red clay road, brakes squealing as it pulled into Camp Hearn. Inside, 23 German prisoners, hands stiff from the cold, eyes guarded. One of them, Oberfeldwebel Erich Krauss, 27, lean, with a stitched-up temple, leaned to his comrade. "If this is Texas," he muttered in low German, "they'll probably shoot us by morning, or work us to death." No one replied. The truck halted. The tailgate dropped with a slam, and the prisoners stepped into the strangest thing any of them had seen since the war began. A Christmas tree, real pine, not paper, with lights, ornaments. Some American soldier had even painted wooden stars gold. Behind the tree, a sign, "Library, open daily." Inside, a smiling guard in a Santa hat passed out something, round, pale. "Vanilla ice cream," he said in decent German. Krauss froze. He had fought in Normandy, held the Siegfried Line, survived the bulge. But nothing, not artillery, not frostbite, not hunger, prepared him for this. He looked around, at the choir, practicing Silent Night, at the smell of peppermint, at the paper snowflakes on the mess hall window, and something flickered in his face. Not fear, not relief. Something worse. Confusion. He didn't know it yet. But this camp, this library, this ice cream, this ridiculous tree, would shatter something deep inside him. Something the Reich had spent 10 years building. 6 weeks earlier, Krauss had been deep in the Ardennes, commanding a machine gun squad with the 116th Panzer Division. Operation Watch on the Rhine was underway. The Führer's last gamble. Krauss believed in it. In the snow. In the silence. In the ghosts of old Prussian victories. The Americans would fold, he told his men. "They can't stomach the cold," he laughed at. "Too used to hamburgers and jazz." But by the third week, things fell apart. Shells ran low. Gasoline froze. Orders came late, or not at all. On December 15th, his unit was ambushed near Saint-Vith. Krauss was knocked out by debris, captured with half his platoon. And 2 days later, blindfolded, disarmed, he boarded a train headed west. Through France, across the Atlantic, into the heart of the enemy. He imagined Texas like the propaganda posters, barbed wire fences, barking dogs, punishment lines. A place for re-education, for revenge. But the train was warm. The guards were polite. They passed out something in red cans. Coca-Cola. Krauss sipped it once. Sweet, bubbly. He pushed it away. "This is what they fight for?" he muttered. He didn't understand. Not yet. The POWs passed billboards. A cowboy drinking milk. A woman in overalls welding plane parts. Smiling school children. The words stung. Victory through freedom, built by all. At night, from the train window, he saw rows of blinking lights stretching for miles. Electric grids, infrastructure, civilization. He thought of the blackout zones back in Cologne, of the broken plumbing, of how long it had been since he'd seen a light bulb that worked. But pride hardened him. "They're soft," he told himself. Americans are addicts, addicts of luxury, and that will destroy them. In his jacket pocket, he kept a folded copy of Der Adler, the Luftwaffe magazine. One article called American Troops, Childlike in Their Comforts, Terrified of Suffering. Krauss read it every night. He needed to believe it. Because if that wasn't true, then what was? In the camp truck, as they neared Herne, the prisoners grew quiet. They saw no prison guards, only tall fences and flags. One man whispered, "They'll humiliate us." Another said, "They'll starve us." Krauss said nothing. He was calculating, judging the enemy. But then the gate opened, and the lie began to unravel. The first morning in Camp Herne began with a whistle, not a shout. No boots slammed doors. No rifles struck steel bars. A guard tapped lightly on the frame and spoke German. "Breakfast. Warm. Hurry, or it gets cold." Krauss blinked awake. The cot was clean. The pillow smelled of soap, not mold. The man in the next bunk, a baker from Dresden, smiled as he tied his boots. "They gave me socks," he whispered. 3 pairs. Krauss didn't answer. He was already watching, listening. The mess hall was spotless. Long tables, trays, rows of cutlery. On the wall hung a sign, "Respect earns respect. Clean hands, clear minds." He stared at his food, eggs, potatoes, bread, still warm. He didn't touch it. Later that day, 2 GIs led the group across the yard, not to labor, not to dig trenches, to a room filled with books, real ones, not propaganda, not censored manuals, shelves of literature in English and German. A British POW, sitting near the corner, waved a Hemingway. Krauss picked up a copy of All Quiet on the Western Front. He ran his fingers over the cover, then dropped it, as if it burned. That evening, a Red Cross truck arrived. Inside, packages, one for each prisoner. Cigarettes, chocolate, soap, razor blades. One man found a deck of playing cards. Another found a small tin labeled foot powder, and when Krauss opened his, he found a comb, metal, durable, stamped on the back, "Property of U.S. Army, made in Ohio." He turned it in his hands. What kind of enemy sends you hygiene supplies? His thoughts raced. Was this a trick? Psychological warfare? Or weakness? Across the room, a Catholic prisoner knelt in prayer. Then from under his cot, he pulled out a book, the Psalms, printed in English, with a handwritten note. "For our German brothers in captivity, may peace find you." Krauss looked away. He hated that it felt kind. That night, he wrote in his notebook, "No shouting, no orders. They let us walk freely. The Americans smile too much. It's unnatural. I don't trust it." But even as he wrote the words, something inside him wavered. He remembered his last winter on the Eastern Front. Frost-bitten feet, soup that tasted like snow, Russian prisoners herded like cattle. And now, eggs, a book, a comb. By the 3rd week, the strangeness wasn't just occasional. It was constant. December wind rolled through the camp, but someone had wired speakers into the trees. Christmas music drifted through the branches. Bing Crosby. in English. Then Omar, a choir, not American. German, prisoners harmonizing Stille Nacht under the Texas sky. Kraus stood still, watching. He didn't join the song, didn't know if he was allowed, or if he even wanted to. The next day, someone brought in pine branches. Prisoners carved ornaments from soap bars, scrap metal, even bread. On December 24th, a guard appeared at the barracks, holding a tub. "Ice cream," he said with a grin. "Merry Christmas." Real vanilla. Cold as snow. Some prisoners laughed, cried, devoured it with their hands. Kraus tasted his slowly. It melted on his tongue like something stolen from a dream. And then something else melted too. Not the ice cream. His distance. In the recreation hall that night, a group of POWs played chess. Another played cards with a Tang guard. Kraus wandered near the back, drawn by the sound of pages turning. There it was, a library. Not large, but dense, books in rows organized by topic. There was Shakespeare, Poe, Whitman, even Goethe and Schiller. He reached for a book titled Germany and the Jews. He opened it. Inside, photographs. Not American propaganda. Real images. Camp names. Testimonies. Starved faces. Kraus shut the book hard. His hands trembled. He looked around, half expecting a trap. A laugh. A performance. But no one was watching. No one pushed. No one cared what he read. That night, he didn't sleep. His bunkmates snored. Guards paced softly outside. Kraus sat upright, staring into the dark. Something was wrong, but not with the Americans. With him. He whispered a line he had read in the book, over and over, barely breathing. A system built to pretend nothing is happening is already lost. The next morning, he didn't go to roll call. Instead, he returned to the library and opened the book again. 2 days after Christmas, Kraus was out on work detail, raking leaves along the camp fence. It was cold, but the sun was warm enough to make the frost glisten. From across the field, he heard shouting, laughter, a rhythmic smack of wood against leather. He turned. Behind the mess hall, 6 American guards were playing baseball. Clean uniforms, shined boots. Their bats looked brand new, polished, lanced, light as feathers. The ball cried through the air, soaring clean over the heads of the layers. Cheers erupted. Kraus didn't understand the rules, but he understood the joy. Not forced, not for morale, just play. One of the guards nods to him, watching. "You ever play?" he called out in German. Kraus shook his head. The man tossed the ball, underhand. Perfect arc. Soft landing right at Kraus's feet. Kraus picked it up. It was flawless. Leather tight. Red stitches, perfect. Stamped. Official league. Made in Illinois. He stared at the ball for a long time, then handed it back without a word. That night, a delivery truck arrived. Supplies from somewhere far off. Boxes of food, tools, medical kits, even new shoes for the guards. Everything came labeled, sorted, clean. In the hallway, a corporal explained, We get shipments every Tuesday, on time, every time. Krause's journal entry that evening was short. They are not improvising. They are executing. He started noticing the patterns. The lights always worked. The water always flowed. Every guard knew his shift. Every process smooth. Even the ice cream came on a schedule. He walked into the kitchen one morning to see a giant steel drum labeled Army Ice Cream Mix, Fort Worth. Instructions printed in triplicate. Not indulgence. Infrastructure. That's when it hit him. The thing he'd misjudged. That every German had misjudged. The Americans didn't win because they were soft. They won because they could afford to be soft. Krause didn't tell anyone what he felt. But that night, he stayed behind after dinner, watching the guards talk about cars, vacations, baseball scores. And suddenly, the war felt far away. Not because it was over, but because for these men, it had never been close. January rolled in like a whisper. No snow, just wind across dry Texas fields. Krause spent more time in the library now, less to pass the time, more to understand. He began reading American bulletins, pamphlets from the Red Cross, clippings from Stars and Stripes. And one morning, he found it. A chart. Daily caloric intake. U.S. Army personnel, 4,200 calories. Per soldier, per day. He reread it 3 times. It wasn't a misprint. Back in the Ardennes, they were lucky to get 1,800, half of it frozen bread. His fingers curled around the page. Then he found another document. Rations shipped overseas, Q4, Ein 44. It listed coffee, cigarettes, shoe polish, even chewing gum. Tons of it. Shipped across oceans, over mountains, through enemy fire, just to keep morale up. A captain once told him that morale was for the weak. Now he wasn't so sure. Later that week, Krause sat outside, watching a new batch of POWs arrive. Among them, an American GI, captured in the Ardennes, now part of a prisoner exchange. Tall, young, chewing gum like it was his last mission. When the guards weren't looking, Krause walked over. "Why do they give you so much?" he asked in broken English. The soldier grinned. "So we don't break." Krause frowned. "You mean to fight better?" "No," the man said. "So we don't forget who we are." He pulled something from his pocket. A picture. His wife. 2 kids. A house with a white porch. "We're not just soldiers," the GI said. "We're citizens. We go home." That word, citizens, rang in Krause's ears. He didn't have a home anymore. Not in Cologne. Not in Berlin. He didn't even know if his parents were alive. That night, he returned to the library and asked the British POW on duty a question he never thought he'd ask. How did they build all this? The Brit smiled. "They didn't just build it," he said. "They believed it." In early February, a new man arrived in Barrack 12. Oberleutnant Felix Brandt, Luftwaffe pilot, 31. Flight goggles still hanging from his neck like a relic. He had survived 2 tours, flown over Normandy, bombed Antwerp, and walked with the posture of someone still convinced the war wasn't over. But even he looked shaken. On his second night, he spoke to Kraus. "We hit an American fuel depot near Liège," Brandt said. "Burned for 2 days. Thought we'd crippled them." He paused. "They rebuilt it in 40 hours. Had pipes rerouted before the smoke cleared." Kraus said nothing. He remembered the German fuel trucks back in December. Stuck in mud, tires splitting, engines gasping in the cold. He remembered his sergeant boiling snow just to keep the radiator from cracking. Brandt lowered his voice. "They're not fighting a war, Eric. They're feeding a machine, one that doesn't sleep." 2 days later, a Waffen-SS officer, lean and pale, gathered a few men behind the latrine. Whispers, warnings, rants about betrayal and propaganda. But his voice cracked when he spoke of the news he'd read. Factories in Detroit producing a bomber every hour. Ships launched sideways into the Atlantic like toys. He trembled. "We didn't lose the war," he said. "We were never in it." Not really. His words dropped like stones. Kraus couldn't breathe. That night, he opened his old journal. He flipped through the first pages, the pride, the certainty, the sneering observations about American weakness. Then boom, the shift. Notes about socks, about libraries, about chocolate bars with smiling eagles. He felt embarrassed, then angry, then hollow. He ripped out the first 10 pages, threw them in the stove, watched them curl into black threads. Smoke filled the barrack, but not enough to hide the truth. The next morning, a corporal found Kraus staring at the bulletin board. A flyer had just gone up. Camp movie night, showing The Grapes of Wrath. Kraus didn't understand the title, but he stared at the poster. Dust, suffering, people moving west, not for conquest, but for hope. He whispered, "Even their pain is organized." Back in his bunk, he wrote, "The war didn't end with a bomb or a bullet. It ended when I realized they never feared us, not because they were braver, but because they were prepared." He paused, then added one final line. "The war ended for me with a scoop of ice cream, cold and impossibly kind. It started with something small. Mail." Every Thursday morning, the guards wheeled in a gray cart filled with letters, hundreds of them, stamped, sorted, indexed. "My state, the Union, been pretty gun number. Some Germans got in war gas from them from loans." Others, updates from Red Cross offices in Switzerland. Everything arrived on time, every week, no delays, no mix-ups, no excuses. Kraus stood at the back of the line, watching one man cry as he opened a letter from his sister in Bremen. He whispered to himself, "They built a postal empire inside a prison." Later that week, he joined a cleanup crew near the supply depot. That's when he saw it. A row of boxes marked Quartermaster Corps, Fort Sam Houston. Inside, neatly packed gloves, belts, blankets, even toothbrushes. Each item tagged and barcoded. Each shipment documented in triplicate. He asked the sergeant, "Where does all this come from?" The American grinned. "We've got more trucks than bullets." He wasn't kidding. That afternoon, a convoy arrived. 6-ton GMCs, the same kind Kraus had seen roll through France like a flood. Each one delivered with military precision. Unloaded, catalogued, logged. Nothing wasted, nothing missed. One truck carried nothing but replacement laces for boots. Another, spare ice cream mix, labeled with a date and destination. Kraus stared at the convoy like it was a parade from another planet. He thought of the last weeks on the Western Front, scavenging tires from bombed-out cars, praying for grease, cursing at fuel shortages. They didn't have spare anything. Here, the spares had spares. That evening, he watched a Red Ball Express documentary reel in the rec hall. Black soldiers, mud, trucks in endless rows, tires spinning through hell. A narrator spoke. Every 3 minutes, a truck leaves the depot. Every 4 minutes, one arrives. Supply is victory. Kraus didn't blink. He saw maps, dotted lines stretching from Normandy to the Rhine. Underneath, a single phrase: logistics win wars. He walked out into the night, the projector still flickering behind him. Overhead, the stars looked sharper somehow. Or maybe his eyes had finally cleared. By mid-February, the mechanical room in Camp Hearn was open for maintenance training. A group of prisoners, engineers, mechanics, tinkerers were allowed to help inspect equipment, fix small things. Kraus joined them. He wanted to see what made it all work. What he found silenced him. Each engine in the maintenance yard had a tag, serial numbers, part codes, all logged. One generator, a Model T100, had every component traced to a plant in Michigan. Another, a field oven, came with a repair manual, diagrams, and a packet of replacement fuses. And in a drawer, Kraus found a wrench set, labeled Standardized Bolt Sizes, U.S. Army Spec, 1942 Revision. He blinked. In Germany, they built masterpieces, precision tanks, gleaming planes. But every model was different. Tigers used one thread pattern, Panthers another. Half the vehicles broke down for lack of a $2 gasket. Here, everything fit, everything matched. He looked across the room. One prisoner, a former German tank mechanic, stared at an American truck transmission. He whispered, half in awe, half in grief, "They don't build to impress. They build to replace." That line stuck with Kraus all night. He wrote it down in, "They don't build to impress. They build to replace." The next morning, a documentary played in the rec hall. American factories, women welding, machines pounding out airplane parts like loaves of bread. One woman on screen said, "I make tail rudders every day. 8 hours. Same part. Same bolts. No guesswork." She smiled. When they need one, it fits. Kraus scribbled furiously in his notebook. Then he flipped to an earlier page. The day he saw the Christmas tree. And for the first time, he saw it differently. Not as softness, as structure. Not as indulgence, as design. The tree was real because someone thought it mattered. The lights worked because someone planned for it. The ice cream existed not as luxury, but as proof. Proof that the system was bigger than the war. And in that moment, he saw the truth behind the Coca-Cola ads. The mailroom precision, the chocolate bars, the standard bolts. It wasn't chaos wrapped in comfort. It was ideology wrapped in machinery. March 1945. Camp Hearn was quiet now. No new prisoners. No more choir practices. Just wind through the wire and rumors from the radio room. Krauss sat alone in the library, reading Stars and Stripes. On the front page, a headline: 96,000 planes built. War machine hits peak. He read it twice. 96,000. Germany had produced barely a third of that, and many of theirs never left the hangar, grounded by fuel shortages, missing parts, or Allied bombs. Krauss turned the page. Another article. Coca-Cola opens 64th Frontline bottling plant. He shook his head. They were building soda factories during a war. He ran his fingers over the photo. Soldiers drinking Coke in Belgium, ice still clinking in metal cups. Back in the barracks, someone read from a captured logistics report. American forces consumed 2 million gallons of fuel to block a single German column. 2 million gallons. Krauss whispered, "We lost divisions for that." Later that night, he spoke with a French prisoner, a teacher from Lyon, who had been with the resistance. The man said, "They didn't just outfight you, they outlived your ideas." Krauss nodded. He knew what he meant. It wasn't just the tanks, or the food, or the skies full of bombers. It was the silence, the certainty, the way every train ran on time, every package arrived, every meal was hot. The way no one panicked. Even their fear was measured. He looked around the camp, at the laundry lines, the mail carts, the humming generator, and saw it for what it truly was. An empire of systems, not of men shouting, but of procedures whispering. That night, he wrote in his final journal entry, "They didn't beat us with better rifles, they beat us with routines. With breakfast served at 0700, with socks in winter, with gasoline enough to waste, with joy that didn't look afraid." He paused, then underlined a sentence he had written days before. "The war ended for me with a scoop of ice cream." And beneath it, he added one more line. They were not soldiers. They were a civilization. And it moved like a tide. Summer 1952. Central Texas. The air was thick with crickets and heat. A Buick Skylark rumbled to a stop just outside a rusted gate near Hearn. Grass had grown wild along the fence. The camp was long gone. Eric Krauss stepped out. 40 now. Grayer. He moved slower, favoring his left leg. An old wound from the Ardennes. His son, 10 years old, followed behind, licking a vanilla ice cream cone. "Is this it?" the boy asked. Krauss nodded. The sign had faded, but the shape of the place remained. The outline of the old mess hall, the barracks foundation swallowed by weeds. He didn't speak for a long time. The boy looked up. Was it bad? Krauss thought of the books, the quiet, the library smell. The morning he first heard laughter again. Real laughter. Not from victory, but from someone reading Mark Twain out loud. He thought of the man who played violin every Sunday in the chapel, just for himself, and of the tree, the one with wooden stars. "No," he said softly. "It wasn't bad." His son kept licking the ice cream. Kraus reached into his coat, pulled out a folded page, yellowed, creased from years of hiding. It was his last entry, still legible. "They beat us with socks, with mail, with music." He handed it to the boy. "Read it when you're older," he said, "when the world stops making sense." The sun dipped behind the trees. Kraus looked one last time through the chain-link gate and whispered, "This where I surrendered." The boy paused, confused. "But you weren't shot, right? You survived?" Kraus smiled. "No, not my body." He nodded toward the field, now glowing gold with dusk. "My belief." The wind stirred the grass. The child finished the last bite of ice cream. And Erich Kraus, former sergeant of the 116th Panzer, closed his eyes and listened to nothing. No orders, no engines, no lies. Just the quiet hum of a nation that had never needed to shout.